Hello, and welcome to the Ending Body Burnout Show. We are your hosts, Chris and Philly, co-founders of a multi-award-winning functional medicine practice, serving busy people with energy, mood, and gut issues.
While busyness, addictive doing, people-pleasing, and perfectionism might be the norm, it's not normal, and it's a major contributor to health issues.
Our goal with this show is to give you a holistic root cause approach to healing your body so that you don't have to continue doctor or diet hopping or popping a gazillion supplements hoping something might stick.
So get ready to heal your body, get your spark back, deeply connect with yourself, and step into the life of your dreams.
Let's dive in.
Hello, welcome to the podcast. We are very excited to share this episode with you. Chris and I just recently interviewed Christopher Knight, who is a holistic practitioner, and there are a lot of similarities in his work and how we help our clients end their body burnout at a deeper metaphysical root cause level. So this conversation that we had was a lot of fun. We're speaking the same language. Christopher uses terms that are maybe a bit different to us, but essentially when you lose connection with your true and pure self, then that is when body burnout shows up in your system. So a formal bio of Christopher Knight is he has had over 15 years of experience as a holistic practitioner. Chris has discovered that many of the stress-related illnesses plaguing people's lives today, which are largely overlooked or avoided by many health practitioners, including holistic practitioners, originates at the level of identity and ego, otherwise known as shadow work. To empower his clients and fellow holistic practitioners around the globe, Chris found self-intelligence, which offers specific skills, tools, and experiences to work at the level of the ego to overcome the root cause of stress-related chronic health issues and much more. So let's dive into today's conversation. I know that if you really love the way that we talk about the body and the metaphysical side of body burnout, you'll really enjoy this conversation that we have today with Chris. Welcome to the podcast, everyone. We're super excited to have Christopher Knight on our podcast today to be interviewed. He is a holistic practitioner, so we're going to dive right in and get to know him really personally because I think he has a lot of awesome stuff to talk about.
Hey, Chris. Good name.
Hello.
Oh yeah, this could get confusing. Two Chris's.
That's why
Do you get called Chris or Christopher?
I get called Christopher generally when I'm in trouble. So
Okay.
Same.
Chris
So we'll call
good.
you Chris.
That's awesome. And I put Chris Knight as your title down the bottom just to distinguish from me, Chris.
Yeah, this is for people watching on YouTube. Okay, so let's dive into your own body burnout story because we find that a lot of our guests who are in the holistic health, healing, personal development space generally have their own story that they have moved through to now do what they do. So you're happy to dive in what that looked like for you?
Well, I've experienced body burnout various times in various chapters where major growth areas have been major times of shift and deepening into a more aligned aspect of myself. One of my first experiences of body burnout was in my early 20s. And basically everything I was doing at that time just came crumbling down on me, right? It was like a dark night of the soul. You've probably heard of this kind of concept. And there was many areas of my life that were out of control or were just not in integrity or out of alignment. And it was at the end of a relationship. And I essentially was in one of those Romeo and Juliet kind of level intensity relationships from the time I was 15 to 22 years old, which is really young. But it was like, and I think I mentioned Romeo and Juliet because they were really young, But to us at that time, it was us or death. It was us or the end of the world sort of feeling about it. And but it had its time. And at that time I had pretty toxic debt, and I also wasn't doing the work that really felt aligned with me. And I was terrified of what was going to happen if I could handle the grief of the loss of this relationship. I didn't know what I was going to do with my trajectory, where I was going. Um, and yeah, it was like the world just collapsed on me. And at that point, I had to ask questions I never asked, and start to look into ways of seeing myself that was not conditioned for me anywhere, whether that was, at home, at school, or anything like that. And the manifestation of it was, chronic health issues. So I really love speaking on a podcast that deals directly with health, because my journey has been that whenever I'm called to listen at a deeper level within myself, and if I've resisted that for some period of time, my health will show it. It's like if it doesn't show anywhere else, the body symptoms will come in and go, "Hey, you're not listening. It's time to wake up to what's really going on here." And so, I had chronic back pain at that time for like 6 years, and it got me all the way to like pain management clinic kind of thing, where they're telling me you're going to have this pain for the rest of your life. You're going to have to manage it. And what came with that pain was a lot of fatigue as well. What came with that came depression. And it was like that spiral down. If anyone's experienced where health can just feel like it's just one thing after another collapsing. And it feels like, it feels dire. It's like, I felt like 90 years old or something, and I was so young, and it was just like, this can't be happening kind of thing.
Mm.
And it was that was the very first time where I was intuitively open to things that I wasn't before, and I took the inner journey from that point. So that was one of the chapters. Yeah.
Yeah. So many similarities, probably with both Chris and I,
Mm.
actually. But yeah, in your
Yeah.
20s, doing the things. I experienced a lot of chronic back pain too, and had the x-rays, the MRIs, the physio, the chiro. In the end, they're like, there's nothing wrong with you, but maybe just give it time. It's like, no, my body is clearly trying to tell me something here.
Mm.
So for you, like around that, you started doing your own inner work. What do you feel like was the deepest root cause that was actually leading to the experience of body burnout?
I love that question, because I love root cause. Like, root cause is my whole existence. Okay, is like intentionally focused on root cause. And I've developed, so over 15 years of continued like up and down journeys with health, and inner discovery, what's really going on inside. Um, I've discovered the root cause when I look back for myself and with everybody I work with, was some kind of fear of loss and fear of uncomfortable feelings, fear of experiencing uncomfortable feelings. And that has a lot of different layers to it. So I was terrified of losing the partner that I had at that time. I was terrified of losing the job that I had at that time that was extremely secure. I was in the public service. I was doing really well there. I've got a whole background that I could go into that would explain why I would be so attached to that. I was uneducated. Prior to that job, I was basically semi-illiterate. So to get in a position like that was a real it was amazing. And yet my heart's saying, this is not it. This is not where it's going to end for you. And I'm like, I don't think I can handle what that unknown horizon looks like.
Mm.
Right. And that included the relationship I was in at that time. And if I look at both of those things, I was afraid of what I was going to lose, what I was attached to at that time. I was also afraid of not being able to handle the grief. And because grief can be debilitating, or it can seem to be debilitating, particularly when we're not culturally conditioned to really work with grief. It's a hidden, taboo kind of space because it's pretty gnarly there, and it's a bit ugly and it's a bit messy, right? So there was this, and uh, so what I've continued to look at throughout my life, because at that time I was in complete denial there was fear at all. I had no conscious awareness there was fear happening at all. I wasn't sitting there going, I'm afraid of this and I'm afraid of that.
Mm.
That was not the conversation that was going on. And yet that's exactly what was going on. And what I've realized working with, thousands of people now is that's a really common thing, that we are living in psychological fear states that are completely masked over by our sense of self, our self-image, the values we have, the beliefs we're running with, all of the things, the roles that we're playing and everything else. And it's just kind of running in the background, unnoticed, driving everything. So what was the root cause? A lot of fear, unnoticed, unacknowledged, and to this day, it's the same thing. So if I experience symptoms, which I do, I sometimes experience symptoms that will come up. It's a very fast process now. It was a very long process back then, but it's extremely fast now. I can go straight to the root of it. Where's that fear connected into the circumstance that I'm currently in? And then, of course, how do I go about releasing that, which is the most important thing. So yeah, fear of loss. I've worked with a lot of different fears because I've got a whole list of fears that we can all relate to, right? Fear of failure, fear of abandonment, fear of losing control, fear of it just goes. There's honestly 100 of them that are very common to humans to relate to. For example, if I'm going to public speak, right, I might be afraid that I'm going to be rejected or not accepted by the people that I'm speaking to. I might be afraid that I'm going to say something wrong and humiliate myself. So I'm afraid of humiliation. And there's just so many of these fears, right? But if you boil them all down, it comes back to this fear of loss. And it's like, if we can be so centered around that understanding, things become very simple. But when they're not centered around that understanding, things become very complex. It's like you can do so much work on yourself for ever and work around things and done. It's like, I'm not interested in that. It's like, what's really going on? How do we work with it? Yeah. So
get to the nitty gritty.
Get to the nitty gritty. There's a few things that I think about around that, like fear of self as well. The greatest fear that you have about yourself generally creates more fear. But also thinking about the nervous system, which is connected to all our body systems, connected to symptoms. Our whole system is wired for survival. And so it's also wired for safety as well. So it's interesting that you were using the word fear a lot. Like the fear will just put your nervous system into a state of fear, fight, flight, but also the nervous system would prefer to stay in chaotic familiarity.
I call that the comfortable nightmare.
Yeah, the comfortable nightmare. I like that one.
Cool.
Which is just crazy. Like our conscious, rational mind is like, that doesn't even make sense. But until you really get to the deeper stuff that's going on in your system and create safety inside of yourself and safety essentially to be you in your body, then it's, what did you call it? A comfortable nightmare.
Comfortable nightmare.
That's a play on your last name too, almost. Could be.
Yeah, exactly. Could be, yeah.
Trademark, Chris Knight.
Now, you talk a lot about working with the ego in your work. Can you talk about that? So people who, we hear the term ego, probably listeners have heard it, but some people might not know exactly what that means and why that's actually important to work with.
Yeah, well, we all have different definitions of a lot of different things. So my definition of ego is anything you've become attached to and connected to be your sense of self. So this is now whatever this thing has become a part of my sense of self. So that could be anything external and anything internal, anything this side of the eyes and anything this side of the eyes. So we can be identified with our home or our car or our partner or our job or our role or anything like that. We can identify ourselves with that thing. And so that's creating a shape of me by doing that. We don't realize this, but it's creating a shape that we take on to be ourselves. And then inside of ourselves, we have our emotional states and our thoughts and beliefs and perceptions. And this is creating a sense, like a feeling sense of self, which we identify as me. That's me. So, for example, what this creates is like if you were to say nice things to me right now, I could connect that to like, oh, you're talking about me, the person inside, and that person is getting, lifted up, if you like, if the comment was accepted, of course. And then that feels like, oh, thank you that you've said that to me. In further investigation, who we really are goes further back than those things. And we discover ourselves as something more even pure and spacious than what we've become identified with. And the challenge with the ego state is all of those things are changing. They're not fixed. They don't stay the same. And so the ego state is only a challenge because the ego state wants to stay the permanent state. It wants to be around. It's like it wants to have a sense of control and a sense of safety, as you said. But the ego state provides the opposite of that because it doesn't have stability. It's in of itself not stable. So a role can change, a relationship can end, a job can disappear, right? Different emotional states can come and contradict your sense of self. And then what am I supposed to do with that? This doesn't make sense. I'm not supposed to feel these things. That's not who I am. And it creates a whole bunch of confusion. So the ego just simply is a false sense of who we think we are. And it is felt and it is believed.
Mm-hmm.
It is felt and believed. And so it's very convincing. It's extremely convincing. And those people who have gone through health crisis or burnout and so on, they generally have to have let go of something that they thought was them, that's not them.
Mm-hmm.
And they realize, wow, this healing journey was so powerful because I discovered at a deeper level who I actually am, not who I believed myself to be that was unquestioned. And it had to be questioned. So I had to somehow let go of something. And what I've heard from your stories is a very similar realization. Something was realized and let go of for the energy to return, because the energy is our body energy is sapped in this trying to control this very unstable sense of self. Because it is intrinsically, it is by nature insecure, it is by nature lacking, it is by nature not enough. And so that's going to show up. It's going to show up in relationships, it's going to show up at work, it's going to show up everywhere. And it's pretty exhausting, right? So you get the burnout. You end up burning out with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that I think about when we were talking about chronic pain before, oh my gosh, massive identity around being like the fit girl. It's like, look at all these things I can do with my body. This is before kids. After kids, tried to continue holding up to that identity and feeling so torn that I couldn't do the things that I used to be able to do. But I was holding on to, like as you're talking about, the ego identity, to the point that I was literally, every time I tried to pick up a barbell to do a back squat or a deadlift, like my back just kept cracking in a really bad way.
Yeah.
But it took me a really long time to stop that. And I think that that's just like a really practical example of what you were talking about, to then be able to say, hang on, that actually, like, that identity doesn't define my worth as a human being, like my pure worth as a human being. So therefore, in order for me to be able to heal, I must change the way I'm moving my body and exercising. And I see that a lot too with clients, people, like especially something like chronic fatigue, where they may have ended up there because of running type A, perfectionism, people-pleasing patterns, always doing. They get to the point where they're so exhausted and their capacity is limited and they can't do as much, but their energy is still trying to do the things. And so it gets stuck in that perpetual cycle of, it makes it really difficult to heal. So thanks for sharing that, because I love the way that you described the ego.
And that's it. That's one of my first experiences myself that we can both relate to. I was going way too hard at the gym in ways that were compensatory to the ego aspect that was lacking in a certain way. And my body couldn't do it. It was failing. And then it was this frustration. My body's failing me now. You know, my body's failing me. And it's like, who's this me that my body's failing? Have I ever asked this? Right?
I love it.
And it's like, no, we don't question the me. We question the body. Like the body's the problem. It's like, wait a sec. Right.
Yeah. Are you laughing because you're thinking about your strongman days?
I really resonate, but not even only purely for myself, but I see this over and over and over again. It's like my body is what are some other things?
At war with me.
Yeah,
it's fighting me.
I've got a dodgy knee, or I've got a bad back, or my body is killing me, or like it's this sort of language. There's so many different ways of doing it, but it's just like, well, hang on, how are you right now? How are you being right now? Oh, I'm exhausted. All right, well, and why are you trying to do the not exhausted stuff? Like you're not running on full capacity right now. So why are you trying to? And
that's where the question is, what are you going to lose?
Yeah.
As soon as you understand the loss, it becomes very, very clear. And a lot of it is ego needs. Okay, so speaking of ego has a bunch of needs that have to be met. And the ego need could be, well, I need to be a physical shape, for example, to be loved and approved of. So unless I'm that shape, I don't believe I'll be loved and approved of. So that's my ego need. And this squat and this exercise regime and everything is going to fulfill that need. So I have to keep it going, right? Or there's a whole range of ego needs there that drive. I might lose my own love and approval. We can literally lose our own love and approval, right? That's what shame is about. And it's like, I have a self-image, which is an interesting phenomenon, isn't it? I have a self-image, and I have to upkeep the self-image that I believe will essentially give me what I want to feel okay inside. If I can present to the world in a certain way that I believe will do that, then everything will be okay. But of course, the world doesn't serve our self-image, and certainly our body doesn't serve our self-image. And that's one of the places that it becomes a rude awakening, is that the body's not on board with this idea. The body is governed by universal laws. It's not governed by the idea of what we think it should do. And so there's a humble pie that happens there. It's like, I've got to surrender to the bigger reality outside of the idea I have of myself. And that's not everyone's up for that. It's like, and for some of us, we're fortunate that our bodies are so sensitive. They won't let us go too far with delusions before they start sending the message. Like, it's like, I'm not letting you get away with being that out of integrity or that misaligned or that delusional. I'm going to show you the signals, and that's you falling apart, right? And this is why a lot of us are here, because we're sensitive to that.
I love that. And it's just kind of like the smoke alarm beeping, beeping, beeping. It's like, how long is it going to take you to get a chair or a ladder and change those batteries? It's that the back sensations is the beep. You know, the knee sensations is the beep in the smoke alarm. It's like, okay, what is your body, or what's being said here? What's the signal all about?
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes the more stubborn the person, I've found, speaking from experience myself,
And me.
and you, and a lot of other
Oh,
people.
and me. Let's all
let's
be
in
the
the
stubbornness.
let's be in the stubborn circle. You know, it brings us to a halt. Our bodies, the sensations, the experience that we're noticing. It's like someone's just duct taped a megaphone to the smoke alarm. It's like, beep, change the batteries.
Yeah. Stubbornness is such an important subject, and it's a very childish aspect of the ego state to be stubborn, and that's often why it requires a softening to mature. And letting go is a part of that. The stubbornness is the hold on.
That's
I'm
protection.
I'm going to hold on to the need to be validated, for example. I'm going to hold on to the need for attention. I'm going to hold on to the need to be wanted. Like, if I don't get that, I cannot be okay. So I'm so stubbornly believing that that's true. And we're not taught to question these ideas. We're not taught to question these conditioned narratives. They just run rife in our lives until our bodies fail, and then or other things fail too. Like, it's relationships is a very good example of where that happens. Finances, the body extends out to every aspect of your life. You know, it's all a reflection of yourself, to be learned. And but I love the body because the body represents the greatest loss, which is death.
Yeah.
So the body, when the body symptoms come up and they're reflecting death, there's a greater degree of willingness to look at things, because it's like, because the fear I'm talking about is psychological, meaning self-created. It's not actually something that is founded in reality. And that can take a lot of life experience to understand that, to discern the difference between a real danger and something that's self-created. So I often use the boogeyman, you know, because we can all relate to creating the boogeyman that we were afraid of, right? And most of us at least, can relate to not being afraid of that anymore, and maybe even love being in the dark. It's like an enjoyable thing. It's like, okay, well, that's shifted. But my fear that I might miss out, that's just running rife, and it's just destroying my relationships, or my need for appreciation is killing so many different areas of my life. And it's like, but I believe it if I don't have anything else. So it's like, until you discover who you are beyond that ego state, it's the one running, it's the one driving everything. That's why I speak about the ego in that way. But you could even remove that word ego if that's distracting, and just discover what you're afraid of losing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it would be the same conversation. It's the same conversation, because I think people get a bit like defensive about like the ego with all the ideas, you know. It's like,
Sounds
just
a bit
drop
weird.
it. Just look at the fears that are there, and the internal fears are the ones that we often haven't investigated very much. I think people can relate more to the external fears of loss, but the internal fears of loss are driving harder than the external fears of loss, and they're the ones we're mostly unaware of. Yeah.
Can we talk about the drama triangle? We love the drama triangle.
I absolutely love the drama triangle.
Now,
Yes.
I know any clients listening will know what we're talking about, but for anyone else who is listening that is like, what the heck is a drama triangle and what's that got to do with body burnout and stress? Can you
Yeah.
elaborate?
Well, my version of the drama triangle dovetails perfectly with what we're talking about now. So it goes from those fears, whatever they are. If it's not questioned and believed, that means now I've embodied this to be a reality. Then it moves to the victim state as the starting point. So, because whenever you lose something, there's the energetic of the victim, right? And then directly from there, we'll go into a rescuer role or a perpetrator role from that point. And so who we become is like a soup of this cycle within ourselves of the victim, perpetrator, rescuer. And it happens very quickly. So if anyone feels as though they're victimized by a situation, very quickly, almost the instant after, they will perpetrate against themselves or others in subtle or extreme ways. It depends on what the situation is. Subtle ways will usually come through dialogue and body language and this type of thing, or it'll come through addictions and distractions. But further out to that, it'll be really obvious things. But mostly what we're experiencing is the subtle ramifications of the victim, perpetrator, rescuer dynamic. And it's a huge conversation in relationships, right? Because it's showing up all the time there for people. But when it comes to the body, that's the state of stress that the nervous system is in, that's, producing the toxic hormones and chemicals that are breaking down the tissues of the body and stopping absorption of nutrients and oxygen and da 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 da. You can go on the whole chemistry of that. But that's all happening as a reflection to me of this state. If you've taken that on and embodied that in yourself, and I've done a lot of work with, I've trained people in emotional anatomy, right? So that's reading the body, reading the state that you've taken on. And and it's amazing to see when people have held those states for like long periods of time, usually because they've experienced trauma, right? They've experienced trauma in their childhood and so on. It presents so clearly in their physicality. It presents as like fixed states of body language, and you'll see certain lines and looks, and you just see someone, you go, geez, they've had a tough road. Like it's all over their face. You can sort of see this. And so there's a lot to discuss around it. And I love this because it's less of a place that I tend to find people identify with. There's many areas in the health and wellness space, the holistic space, where it's like try to find your type of whatever, like whatever that is. There's a few different things opening up around the space. And I find the ego actually loves to hide in those areas. It's like, yeah, I can grab that and I can use
Personality
that.
tests.
Yeah. Um, and whereas with the victim, perpetrator, rescuer, I don't find there's such a strong tendency to want to identify with any one of those. Do you know what I
No, yeah.
mean?
It's just like people get a bit aggressive about it, or they're like, "No, I'm not a victim. This is stupid." Or like, "No,
Yeah,
I'm not. I'm just going to go rescue someone else so I can deflect my own issues." And
exactly. And the rescuer, I coined good person syndrome.
Oh, I like
Um,
it.
and good person syndrome is one of the toughest things to see because it's so justifiable to
Mhm.
be in that state. And yet it is like one of the number one causes of body burnout is
Yeah,
being in good person syndrome.
yeah,
And because it's so justifiable to be there and it's so right and it's so righteous to be in that space,
Mhm.
to be that rescuer position. But it is such a perpetration that comes through it. Usually it's to their own bodies.
Mm.
So their own bodies will be their expression of where that perpetration plays out. But it is also
Mm.
outward from there in relationships and so on. Yeah.
There's often resentment that comes as well. It's like, I do everything for everyone and now I'm exhausted and I never have any time for myself. So it's usually like we call a perpetrator aggressor.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah. I literally just got
Or
an
villain.
email from someone about she's working through the drama triangle and identified with, oh, far out. Even as a little girl, I have been so worried about the world. Like that's kind of like where it can show up subtly as a rescuer, that until you start unpacking the drama triangle, that actually kind of looks like a good thing, but it actually literally burns people out. Empaths is probably like, I get a lot of people say, I'm just an empath. I feel things like really deeply. And not that that's a bad thing. Nothing's bad until it is. But it's like, well, if that's sapping your energy and your emotions and you're stuck now in this cycle, then
For a lot of
people are
people,
hiding out from, behind the rescuer.
I find for a lot of people, the empath is a really clever cover for the victim mode
Mm,
because they're actually often a victim of their own sensitivity.
yeah.
Because remembering those two things are the loss and uncomfortable feelings. And it's like, I feel like lots of stuff, and a lot of that's making me uncomfortable, I'm now a victim of what I'm feeling, and I'm going to use this identity called I'm an empath. And now if that becomes identified with in the way that the ego would use it, it will have destructive causes because it's just because it's fear-based. Anything fear-based causes the fear to happen. It's like the universal law is you get what you fear. So it doesn't protect us. This is the point. It's not like it's a wrong thing to do. It's just it's not going to work.
Yeah.
But whenever you get an identity given to you, it feels like a relief, even like a diagnosis. How many people feel relieved when they first get a diagnosis? It's like, oh, I know what this is now. I'm clear about it. I've got this. And it's like, yeah, but that doesn't change the symptoms. That doesn't remove the responsibility to deal with what's going on. But it does feel like that when I now understand what I'm dealing with. And it's like that's externally oriented. Again, the ego is using that. It's using that to fuel itself. And it's innocent, of course.
Or they use that diagnosis to justify the management or suppression of the symptoms and the signals. And so they take medication or even things that seem on the surface to be benign, like breath work and stretching and yoga and all this sort of stuff, which is, I like. It's not nothing's bad until
helpful.
But it can be used as a crutch or a management suppression type thing to look at, hey, what fear are you actually covering up? Like how come you got that? Like what's the root cause of that? Where's that come from?
And at that position, because of our conditioning, it's like, why should I be responsible to even ask that question? That's not even my responsibility. And anyone who's had chronic pain has had to come to some realization. This is my responsibility. It's not my fault. It's not a fault. It's just my responsibility to really look at this. But I don't know how to look at it. Like, where do I even start to look at it? And that's why I love speaking with people like you, because you're offering that. You're offering ways for people to inquire, perhaps, to what's really happening. Yeah.
Can we end with some practical takeaways for people that might be listening that could actually start moving out of, whether it's the drama triangle or what to do when they're getting triggered? Like a lot of people use the word triggered. I'm feeling something, whether it's an emotional or a physical. What could be some first initial steps for someone to start moving towards holistic healing?
Well, the first steps that I can resonate with in my own experience and that I, support other people with is first discover who you really are as an actual realization and an experience that's not belief-based, that is just self-evident. And usually that will come to some form of silence, some kind of meditation, something that brings you to the obvious that you are this awareness behind everything. And you don't have to believe that. You're not subscribing to a belief. You're just seeing the obvious. Yes, I can see a thought. Yes, I can see that emotion. Yes, I can see that. I'm the seer. I'm not the things. And have a habit and discipline around remembering that and being with that, once or twice a day, or at least once a day, coming back home to yourself. That's what, you could call it that, coming back home to yourself. So that's this is who I really am. So what happens there is you don't even have to try, but the fear is already alleviated in the fact of who you are. You're not trying something to do to get rid of the fear. You're actually coming out of it by the fact of that realization. So that's a daily kind of practice. The second thing is to learn how to identify what you're not. So this comes down to understanding thoughts and perceptions, beliefs, and so on. So for example, when you're triggered by something, there are very typical thoughts that are a part of that trigger that we as people into this society are completely unaware of happening. And they're really simple thoughts. And those thoughts, because they're not aware of, they become part of our sense of self and are lived as a reality. So if you're triggered by something, what are those thoughts? And they usually come to something that you think and believe should or shouldn't be happening. For example, this shouldn't be happening, or this should be happening. So now I'm in an argument with reality and I'm believing that, and that should and shouldn't is always tied back to something that this fear is going to be lost in that, which the nervous system is then triggering off the whole biological process. There's usually what if thoughts. What if this doesn't go right? What if I go on that plane and it crashes? What if this relationship fails? What if these kinds of thoughts will generally be behind this trigger, and the what if will be felt, experienced in the body, and now that's me. That's me who's in the vibration of that. There are needs, and there's a whole range of thoughts that I have. There's about 5 or 6 primary ones that you want to be aware of. And from there, it's to question the reality of those things. Essentially, is this true? Like, what I'm believing, is this a fact, right? Like, can this be put up for question? Is the fact that it looks like my partner's flirting with someone there over there while I'm at this party, does that really mean it's the end of our relationship that I'm believing right now that's causing my behavior in this moment? Is that really true? Right? And so we learn to realize I'm only suffering my perception because I'm not in control of what's happening out there in the way that I would like to be. So we start to realize, I have been telling the world it has to show up the way that I want it to show up to feel okay, but it doesn't ever do it. So this is where it's, okay, I've got to know who I really am, and I've also got to understand how to investigate what I'm not that I believe I am. So they're the two things that are the starting points for simplicity in the process of freeing yourself from the inside out and the process of healing. Because healing cannot happen whilst those things are believed. Because whatever you believe and think holds the vibration of your feeling state, and your feeling state is just emanating out to everything throughout your whole body, through every cell of your body, and then outward from there. So until we learn to do that, now no one can tell me, particularly in our day and age, maybe it's changing now, but we didn't get one subject at school even what a belief was. Did we? They've never sat down and gone, this is what a belief is.
Mm.
And this is what a feeling is, and this is what an emotion is, and this is what a nothing of that has been said to anybody
I,
until more recently.
I studied psychology at university, and I'm pretty sure they didn't talk about beliefs. They talked a lot
No.
about behavior.
Yes, yes. Because you can diagnose behavior and it keeps it there, it keeps it out there, it keeps it external, you see. Because the world is terrified of realizing we don't know who we actually are. We love going around with this false idea of that as if like we're walking around knowing who we are. But if you ask anybody, who are you? They're like, oh, well, if you ask me directly, I'm not really sure.
Mhm.
But in my general life, I seem to know what I'm doing, to some extent, right?
Yeah.
And it's a taboo subject, this self-discovery. And yet when you actually get involved with it, it's so practical. It's the
Mm.
most practical thing. I'm not interested in fluff and spiritual woo-woo. I don't have any interest in any of that. I'm interested in how does investigating ourselves impact the practicalities of our life? How does it help you be better in your relationships and look after your home and do like why does someone have hoarder? Why is someone a hoarder, for example? It manifests as hoarding.
Mm.
They're afraid of loss. They're connected to it in their identity and they've made it a part of themselves. They cannot let it go because they would be lost with the letting go, you see. It's like it's in
The
everything,
garage.
right?
I just have to say, the garage needs
The
a good
garage.
cleaning
So
out.
Does.
yes, and it is, and they say cleanliness is next to godliness, next to
No God in
godliness,
my garage.
right? Right. So, so the two practical things that I love practical, I love you asked that, is first, have a practice in your life that reminds you of who you are beyond who you feel you are, that small person. Everyone can relate. There's this kind of like small person, particularly when you're challenged, it goes really small, right? If you're going to go to public speak, all of a sudden you're this big, you go to public speak and now you're this big, right? That person, discover who you are beyond that daily. Be with that. That's your source of peace and fulfillment and sanity and everything that we value to be, stand up as a human. And
Mm.
then secondly, learn to investigate and question and don't mistake this as mental work because it's not mental work. It's awareness work.
Mm.
Love it.
Embodiment.
Sometimes people get a bit avert to they're like, I don't want to work
I
what's
want to do
going
that
on out. I don't
mindset
work. Yeah, I don't want to do
stuff.
that mind stuff. It's like, no, this is awareness work.
Mm.
You are becoming aware of what you're not so that you can be free of your own prison sentence.
Mhm.
Because we all discover in the healing journey, I was in my own way. How do I get out of my own way?
Mm.
Right.
Mm.
So yes, this is essentially what it's come down to. But the ego in everybody is not going to like what I've just said. It's too simple. It's like, no, no, no.
Mm.
You don't
Freaking out
understand
right
my
now.
special, you don't understand my special situation. You don't get what it's like for me. And it's like, no, it's the same for everyone. Everyone has a unique experience with the same thing, but the core of it's the same.
Yeah.
So everyone has a unique experience with that. Yeah.
This has been so good. We could talk for hours, but we better wrap up.
Mm.
Yes.
How can people connect with you if they want to learn more? And you also have a free workshop, Wake Up Experience. Do you want to just, let our listeners know how they can find you?
Yeah, well, if you want to, everything I've just said there, if you want to have access to that, I mean, we're in the day and age where we basically give everything away. So, for nothing, to just offer up like so much value. The Wake Up Experience gives you everything of what I just spoke to in terms of the how to of self-discovery and self-inquiry. And your link will be there. It's called the Wake Up Experience, and it's a massive aha moment. It's a massive awakening if you're in confusion or overwhelm and stress, or just feeling a bit lost and want to feel really centered. Then that's the invitation, and you can start that straight away. And as for my services, I do one-on-one coaching with people. Um, you can find me under chrisknight.com.au. And I also have a community who come together to do the work. You could consider it like in a gym, if you like. It's just
Love it.
something that people have as a part of their life. And we do awareness practices every week. We do meditation together every week. we share our insights and what we're discovering within ourselves, and it's helpful to everyone. And it's a really beautiful space that's just thriving at the moment. So
Awesome.
yeah, that's essentially what's there.
So good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris, for coming on. It's been awesome chatting to you. I've got a
Lots of notes.
lot of notes. I'm excited to keep the connection and reach out and stay in touch.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you for having me on, and thank you for your work that you're doing in the world, the dedication you have to to share this. This is so needed,
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, so
Awesome.
appreciate that.
All right, mate. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to catching up with you another time.
Perfect. Thank
All
you.
right. Catch ya.
Thank you so much for listening. We so appreciate you. If you'd like to give us extra smiles, drop us a review and spread the love by sharing this episode.
You can also rate your own state of burnout and the root cause contributors by taking our Ending Body Burnout Assessment on our website. And if you're interested in learning about our group or one-on-one Ending Body Burnout programs, shoot us a DM via Instagram or Facebook.
Have the best day ever.